Okay, Dr. Stone, why are sports so important for young boys?
For many reasons. Um, I'll start with where my area of expertise isn't, and that's in neuroscience. But boys' brains, on average, tilt more towards action, movement orientation. Girls, people communication orientation. Physical activity in general is important for boys who have a greater tendency toward movement as a way to regulate themselves and refocus, sometimes for class, for jobs, for things they need to do. So just movement in general, I think can be more helpful to boys, especially young boys and men who are restless and seeking movement outlets. And you can sort of see that with some of the data on ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, which is, I believe, you can check my stats here, but it's like 2 to 3 times more diagnosed in boys than girls. And
Hmm.
the symptoms for the boys are hyperactivity and impulsivity, like running around the class, fidgeting. And so, there's nothing like recess to get them out and about. It's not even
Hmm.
just about organized sports necessarily. But the research does show that sports participation in both boys and girls is associated positively with better academic performance, let's say, higher grades, standardized test scores. Um, but then, where my area of expertise is in the psychological realm, and the benefits go into the mental, emotional, social development. Um, Organized sports, even casual sports, help with identity formation, um, developing your body awareness, teamwork, perseverance. Gosh, I could go on, like discipline,
Hmm.
goal setting,
Hmm.
and what
Yeah.
my essay in psychology today was about, which was a lot about handling setbacks and bouncing back and being able to temper your emotional highs and low. And it's not just me; studies do show that um, participating in organized sports is associated with reduced anxiety and depression, which we're all talking about now these days.
Yeah. Yeah. Got it. Yeah, exactly. So you're pretty much saying that, with boys, they're more action oriented. And when you're action oriented, especially when you're young, when you have all that energy, you have to have a place that you can go to, which allows you to really express that energy in a healthy way. Right. And
Yes.
while you're doing that, you pick up really important life skills, such as being resilient, hard work, setting goals, being disciplined, being patient, knowing how to handle anxiety. Like there's just so many benefits that come with that. Now,
Yep.
we will get into more of what you said, but something that I found pretty interesting is that it helps boys with school, like actually studying in school with their academics. Why is that? Is it because their brain tends to function better, or like what exactly makes sports so helpful when it comes to helping boys do better in school?
Well, when your body and your emotions are regulated, which is a fancy way of saying like the volume dial is turned down, let's say, like activated. Your nervous system is activated. You go out and you play sports, and your your nervous system got itself out there running around, and now you're sort of calmed and you're more relaxed, and you have a better ability to turn on other parts of your brain to regulate up attention and focus. Um, I mean, we probably both know what it's like to you know, be a kid, go out for recess, and then come back and feel like, okay, now I can like actually concentrate on this difficult math problem or even read.
Exactly.
Like I even as an adult, if I don't exercise, I find it harder to sit and do sustained reading. And I think you see that it's not that girls don't experience that, but I think it's just more emphasized in boys because of their physical makeup, biological makeup. So I think the data bears out that sports can play a really positive role. It keeps you disciplined. You have to I'm going to be at practice from this time to this time, which means I have to study from this time to this time. Your day becomes blocked out, and if you're playing sports and trying to do school, you're growing up a little quicker because you're organizing your
Hmm.
life. You have to delay the gratification of doing something else and do homework. Otherwise, you're not going to get it done if you have practice.
Exactly. Yeah. So when you're more amped up, like it just becomes harder to focus, right? Because I mean, as you mentioned, even for me, like after I go for, for example, a long walk, right, I can come back and actually focus on work a lot better. Like it's not as easy to get distracted because your mind, I guess doesn't need as much stimulation as it would if it didn't really express that extra energy that you had, right? So
Mm-hmm.
that's pretty interesting. You're not as amped up. Now, here's the thing. You talk about how team sports tend to be better when it comes down to helping people with these benefits, right? So what are the benefits that team sports have over individual sports?
Just think of a tennis player after his match. He loses, let's say. He's going to go back. Maybe he has a coach, or maybe he has friends around, right? But it's a very solo endeavor in a lot of ways. It's not that it's completely solitary. I mean, let's say you play doubles, sure. Or you're a swimmer. It's just you and the pool, and you get out, and maybe there's some other teammates, but it's less of a team atmosphere when you're on the playing field or in the pool. Now, let's take a soccer team or a football team or any team sport for that matter. You come back after a loss, and you have shoulders to lean on. You experience the loss relationally as opposed to in a more solitary way. I'm making some generalizations here, but for the most part, you have a team of 20 people, and you're all dejected after a loss. Some are crying, even. If you remember youth sports, and then you have the flip side of it too. You have the joy and the pride and the fun to share with team sports. So I would say it's different in that sense. And I think in team sports, the research actually out there does show that it leads to greater social skills. Sometimes you learn how to deal with tricky situations, hierarchies, and I also think you get social interaction. You can build lifelong friendships on a team. Not that you can't in these solo endeavors. I just think it's more built in to the infrastructure of a team environment. And then I do think there's increasing evidence, and I talked about this in my Psychology Today essay, where it's like it also can build resilience, not just in the sport itself, dealing with adversity, weathering adversity, but it also can translate outside of the playing field into, let's say, school or work. There is some evidence. It's not overwhelming, but at least anecdotally, I can say that it sure has. It's a great metaphor for bouncing back. Sports, team sports. So just a couple other things, and then so there's also then like the leadership component too. You might be a leader on a team, or you might not. And it's dealing with. I'll go back to this, the hierarchy part as well. It's really good. It's a great experience to be at the top of the pecking order, or the depth chart, as I might call it in sports. I think it's even a better experience to be on the bottom of the depth chart and still play. In this world that we live in, I think it's so important for boys and young men to feel like they have a role and a place. They're needed in society. And on a team, even if you're a locker room guy and warming the bench, or filming the game, and then going to practice and practicing, you are serving a purpose. And you hear this all the time, and professional athletes talking about it. The fourth liner is as much a part of the team as the stud. So it's concerning to me, and I wrote about it because I think it's part of a more general trend of male spaces being in decline.
Yeah, exactly. So basically, the main idea is the social and community aspect that you get with sports. And as you mentioned, you really build these lifelong friendships because you suffered together and you all, work together to go and, go and achieve this common goal that means a lot, not just to you, but to everyone around you. Oftentimes in youth sports, the parents are also involved. So it's just like a really interesting space to be involved in, right? Now, something
Well
else
said.
yeah, exactly. Now, something else that you mentioned, which is really important, is the self-awareness aspect, right? Knowing your role in the team, right? When you play sports from a young age. Now, I'm not saying that, oh, you can't be number one, but oftentimes you'll have the humility to accept that, hey, you know what? These are my skill sets right now. Yes, I can improve in the future, but at the moment, these are my skill sets. How can I use this on the team and be as effective as possible, right?
Mm-hmm.
The worst guy to have on the team is the guy that doesn't know his place. You know what I mean? Like he doesn't know his role and he thinks he wants everything. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
that skill gets highly developed when you're in team sports from a young age. And again, you also learn the importance of like that connection between hard work and growth, right?
Yep.
Sports teaches you, hard work and effort normally leads to you getting better, right? So it just makes you a much more wiser person from a young age. Now, would you say that there are any benefits to individual sports over team sports?
I would say that I've taken a look around the research. I'm just sort of like interested in this topic, and it's a
Yeah.
good question. I think that I think the research just shows that team sports are more beneficial across a wide variety of outcomes than individual sports. That doesn't mean, though, that like your kid should not play, track and field or be a swimmer. I think that it's more of a self-regulating experience. Like you're dealing with the pressure, the stress, you're looking at your ranking, your time, and you learn to be alone out in the arena. And I think there's a real benefit to that, to manage your emotions without necessarily having a line mate to your right or left, or if you look at those tennis players again, between sets they're going back to sit down oftentimes by themselves, and sometimes I watch them with their towel, or they get, I'm not a tennis expert by any means, but you can just sort of see like they're working through a lot of stuff in their head. Now, if you look at a hockey player coming off of the ice onto the bench, you're seeing a row of shoulder to shoulder guys. Yeah. They're turning towards, they're dealing with it. They're looking at, the game tape. And so it's a difference between solitary emotion management and relational emotional management. Both are important. So I think the self-discipline, the concentration, the internal toughness in these solitary efforts, they must have some type of benefit. I just can't point necessarily to anything in particular, but I think it's a different experience.
Yeah, exactly. So the self-reliance aspect is amplified more when you're playing individual sports most of the time, right? If we're talking about it in general, because it's just you on the court or in the pool or, on the field. It just kind of forces you to look within yourself and see, hey, you know what? I have to figure this out myself, which oftentimes translates well into life. But there is a line to it, right? Because, at the end of the day, we all need help because everyone's human. You can't do everything on your own, right? But yeah, the self. Yeah. Go ahead.
And just to add to that, because you got me thinking, is that, if you're a, long distance runner on your high school team, you might have a whole bunch of other high school runners, a shot putter, a javelin athlete, to turn to and talk to. So it's not like you're just on an island. But guess what? In the next race, you're going to be competing against your quote unquote teammates, right? So in a different way, you're not sort of banding together towards a common aim, all together towards beating the other opponent, not in the same way. And there's just I guess that's just another subtle difference I thought I'd put in there.
Yeah, exactly. That's definitely something that people have to keep in mind, because you could be training together, but again, if it's track and field and stuff like that, sometimes if you watch like the 100-meter finals, sometimes you'll have two people from the same country that are going for the race, right? So it can be quite tough. It can definitely be quite tough. Now, something else that I also find quite interesting is your emphasis on being a multi-sport athlete, which seems to be an art that's on the decline, right? So Why do you think being a multi-sport athlete is so beneficial? And also, like how many sports are we talking about when we say multi-sport athletes, and like what combination do you normally recommend?
Well, again, it's hard to say specifically how many sports
Hmm.
is good, but you don't even have to listen to me. You can listen to the goats out there, right? The Jordans, the LeBrons, the Gretzky's. I think actually each one of them were multi-sport athletes and have
Hmm.
been on record saying kids need, athletes need to play multiple sports, like over this um, uh, idea of specialization and professionalism, the professionalism of youth sports. I think you know can be quite damaging. It can be. Um, it's probably because in some ways it can create more injuries. If you're think of it as a difference between like CrossFit, training functionally for life versus training just to chop wood. I'm just giving you an example,
Yeah.
right? If you're
Yeah, yeah,
swinging an
yeah.
axe over
I can see what
the
you're saying.
repetitive motion, not to say that that's like a sport, even like hockey. I was a hockey player, right? And I specialized in that as a youth. Let's say I was part of that, burgeoning culture of sports specialization, and I shot and shot and shot and shot and skated and skated and skated and skated and shot and shot and shot. And my lower back has something to say about that, right?
Okay.
And not just my lower back, just from repetitive motion, but also like I did get burned out after a while. So there's two things there. And again, don't even look at me. I'm not a professional athlete. Look at the NBA, for example. And I think there's been some articles written about this. There's an increase in injuries in a lot of young, fit dudes who are playing basketball at their peak. Um, Achilles injuries, I think, let's see, Damian Lillard. I don't know if you follow the NBA, like
Yeah, yeah,
Jason Tatum, Tyrese Halliburton. These are all like
yeah,
insanely good athletes
yeah,
who
yeah.
are in their 20s, and they're blowing out their Achilles. Some speculate, that, okay, well, they're part of the specialization culture where they're training to be the optimal basketball player, and it's overworking certain muscles, and you're not getting that same sort of uh, training across the body that's more CrossFit. So that's not just me. I think uh, specializing leads not just to injuries potentially, but just a sense of burnout. And burnout can be worse than injuries.
Hmm. Yeah, that's pretty interesting. Yeah. Speaking of Tyrese, that was the worst timing ever. Like that was horrible, unfortunate, very unfortunate.
Yeah, I was watching.
Um. Yeah, yeah. It's pretty interesting because no one would really think of it like that, right? Because you might say, oh, doing two or three sports is going to be too much of an overload on the body. But it seems like what you're saying is specializing in one sport just causes more wear and tear on the muscles or functions that you use for that specific sport over time, right? And then you talk about how LeBron, Jordan, I know with LeBron it was football, basketball, Jordan baseball, basketball, right? Now,
Yep.
is there like is it up until a certain age? Because obviously if you want to be a pro, like at some point you have to specialize, right? So in
Yeah.
general, what do you like, how long should a person be a multi-sport athlete before they specialize, just in your opinion?
You know, that's a better question for a coach or a professional athlete. I can talk
Hmm.
about the psychological aspects of it because I'm a clinical
Yeah,
psychologist.
yeah, sure, sure, not a
Um,
problem.
I think that it's like um, you something happens when you show up and you're doing the same thing over and over again every single day. You're seeing the same coach, you're seeing the same, you know, turf or field or ice surface. You miss out on certain social and typical childhood experiences when you start to specialize because it takes over. Just ask parents of kids who
Yeah,
are
it's amazing.
elite athletes. I mean, they're traveling all over the country. They're missing. I was part of that hockey culture
Hmm.
in high
Hmm.
school, and I missed dances. I missed opportunities to meet people and go out and have as much fun as maybe as I could have. Or I missed academic opportunities. It was really hard to study when you're in a car. So I think that there's a can limit your social development. Now, at the same time, you can build wonderful bonds with people. There's all these other benefits to it as well. I'm just talking about kind of like the fraction of the population of elite youth athletes who really burn out. Mm-hmm. And I've seen it in my practice. I've seen it, in my personal life, among friends. So, diversifying sports. I mean, is it 3 sports? Maybe. Yeah. I mean, there are some boarding schools that mandate 3 sports, I think, in order to even go, to even enroll. But that's more opinion and clinical observation on my end.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. And then obviously, if you want to be a pro athlete, if you want to compete at the highest level, you're just going to have to kind of accept that there are many sacrifices that have to be made, right? Which is why you get to compete at that level and many others don't. Like, that's like a whole new conversation on chasing greatness. Sacrifices are just going to have to be made, again, for you as well, like if you want to get to a certain place with academics, like you're going to have to sacrifice some things which other people might not sacrifice, but they're not going to reach the level that you've reached. You know what I mean? That's, again, a whole new conversation. Now, one thing that I find really concerning about your article is how male participation in sports among boys has just dropped dramatically. And it's pretty interesting because girls, on the other hand, have remained stable, right? So why is that? Like, why is male participation in sport dropping while females are stable? Like that's just that's really interesting because boys normally flock towards sports, right? So like, what are those barriers that are stopping boys from taking part in sport the way they used to?
So boys have historically participated in youth sports more than girls, and they actually still do. But that gender gap is just shrinking. And
that's so odd.
And among boys, it's just declined, I think, pretty significantly over the last decade or so. The Aspen Institute has a really good study on this, and the American Institute of Boys and Men did a really in-depth report if anyone's interested. And so the real issue is with lower income families and boys of lower income families, and about 25% of low income boys participate in sports, while I think the overall participation rate for boys is 53% in the US. So there are economic barriers at play with this. So if you parse out the data, you could see that this issue is really more affecting, in a heartbreaking way, lower income boys. So there's been a decline over the decades. If you want to see the exact stats, it's worth going to I think it's called the Aspen Institute State of Play, or the American Institute of Boys and Men. They have a report on it. Just look it up. But like, what's happening with boys? It's increasing costs. It's a bit of a pay to play model, especially when we look at specialization outside of like high school sports, like club sports, let's say. For boys specifically, it's also, there are academic ineligibility issues. So if you're not passing, you're not playing, right? And so, unfortunately, boys are more likely to have a lower GPA than girls. Mm-hmm. They're struggling more academically. There's tons of research that's showing that. Here's another thing. There's a shortage of coaches. Is what some of these reports have shown, that there's a declining number of men who are entering the teaching profession. Well, who's going to coach the soccer team? It's usually oftentimes a male teacher who's going to coach the boys soccer team, let's say. So if there's fewer male teachers and there's less coaches, and so then maybe there's not enough budget or room or opportunity to have a B team or a C team for soccer, like there was in my high school, let's say. Yeah. And so the positive role model, boys need positive role models in their coaches. We talked about the early specialization, right? And so that means that there's a decline in the more casual play. And so there's less low pressure options for kids who just want to go out there and have fun. And there's just a lot more competition. And also, I'm talking a lot here. I'll shut up in just a minute. But it's also, it's the competition from screens. It's like, oh my gosh, well, I could go out and, hit a ball with my buddies, or I could just like play a video game where it's so realistic. I could hit a ball in Wrigley Field, in a professional game, in an extremely real life looking video game. So screens and video games and all those things are also pulling kids away.
Got it. Okay, so does the low income part of things affect girls? Because you'd kind of expect it to hit both, right? Like, why does it seem to like skew towards boys? Because again, most of the time, if you look at the population, it's 50% boys and 50% girls, right? I mean, so like, why does it hit boys more than girls?
I'm not exactly sure. I think it's a really good question. I think that if you're dealing with economic insecurity in your family, I think that's more likely to take a hit on a boy's educational capacity.
And why is that?
Than a girl. I please check the data on this, but I think girls might be more resilient in the face of that when it comes to schoolwork, right? They might be able to deal with that adversity better and keep up their grades, where boys might have more trouble when they're facing economic insecurity to keep up their grades. And if you're not doing well in school, you got to have at least like a 2.0 in some schools to play. That's speculation right there. But you'd have to ask someone who.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Okay, that's pretty interesting. So lower income families, that tends to hit boys harder when it comes down to their academics, more than girls, which puts them in a place where they can't take part in sports like they used to. That's, I guess your speculation of why that is, right?
Okay. Maybe there's something else there. I mean, I don't know how much it relates to the gender thing, but there were a lot of closures during COVID-19 as well. I mean, I've seen this from my clinical experiences, that a lot of younger guys, like they no longer were playing football. And then when they returned to school, it's like, they were just like, they let it go. They stopped playing. There were closures to programs because of budgets, and maybe some of that is still felt.
Got it. Exactly. Now, something that you mentioned is just too much access to screens, right? Having access to these screens, it just leads to boys being in a place where they're just not as motivated to go out and play on the playground or on the court as they once were, right? Which pretty much goes on to something else that you talk about in your blog post, which is this idea of frictionless experiences, right? So can you tell us what that really is, and how much of an effect does that really have on boys? Like, how does it impact them?
Well, frictionless experiences are those where you get immediate gratification and you can just easily disengage from it without any discomfort. So for example, if you want to date and go out there and meet somebody, and you have a sexual drive, well, porn's right there. It's right at your fingertips, quite literally. And you can sort of find that gratification and fast forward literally to the end. And there's no courting, there's no awkward phone calls, there's no friction. It just happens. Right? I'm just talking about porn there, which is an issue with men. And so what else is frictionless? Well, video games. You've probably played. I don't really play, but I definitely looked over shoulders and seen it. It's so realistic. It is so much more exciting than the real world. You can play a multiplayer, video game, and there's different levels, and it requires focus and other cognitive skills, and it's exciting and it's competitive, and it's also kind of numbing. And I think that's where I think it can get damaging. I don't think video games are just categorically bad. I think overuse of them, addiction, is a problem
Mm-hmm.
because, you know, um, it's quick, cheap dopamine. Dopamine is a brain chemical. Um, and it doesn't just make us feel good. It's like it fuels the anticipation and it motivates us to act. It spikes when we gain something, we get an award. It teaches us to repeat it then in the future. It drives us to get up and pursue things. And I think what'll end up happening is that in video games and porn and gambling, these things that are very attractive to boys, it's like when the dopamine rewards come in so fast in these such big bursts, it's like it
Mm-hmm.
floods the brain with dopamine so much more intensely than it would with more natural rewards, like just going out and taking a hike, right? Or like
Yeah.
talking with
Yeah.
friends,
Yeah.
or like
Yeah.
eating a good meal. And so over time, what ends up happening, and neuroscientists will explain this better than I can, but it's like the brain adapts and it's like starts to turn down the volume on those more everyday activities that require patience and some grind, and dating, having it go wrong, having to go back, figure out who you are, what you could do better, what you're looking for, and facing rejection and then bouncing back. And so, the brain changes from this, blowing the dopamine circuits. It's not like a forever thing,
Mm-hmm.
but it's definitely hard to get motivated without like another hit, without another
Mm-hmm.
stimulation. So what we're looking for, or what I'm suggesting here, and others have too, like Jonathan Haidt, who's a psychologist at NYU, it's
Yeah.
like slow dopamine experiences where there's friction involved, where you have to sort of encounter obstacles and grind your way through. And what made me sad is that, oh my gosh, there's no better example of that than sports, because that is physicalized. It's not just a mental resilience. You're literally on a playing field, falling down, literally getting back up, getting hit,
Mm-hmm.
getting elbowed. And there's no quick fix. You can't unplug the controller if you're losing.
Yeah. 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 Exactly. So it pretty much takes away the real life adversity that you have to go through to even achieve something. Right. Again, if we're talking about porn, you can just go to the like the last part of that video that you're watching where it's the climax, right? And obviously
Exactly.
historically it's normally like years. It normally takes years for people to even get to that point. Right now it's like literally 2 minutes. That's it. You can just type something in online and you're there, right? So yeah, it's killing a person's ability to be patient and actually take their time as they go through something, which is quite interesting. Now, how can a person mitigate that? Because this is just going to get worse with like AI and VR and stuff like that. Like, so how can people mitigate that? Because it's just going to get worse as time goes on.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's hard to be
Mhm.
optimistic that like people are going to suddenly, everyone's just going
Yeah.
to suddenly unplug. The tech companies have so much power to just,
Uh
and
huh.
algorithmically, to keep you in it.
Yeah.
It's really, um, you know, it's tough. I mean, just having conversations with boys and men and sort of selling them on slow dopamine, right?
Slow. Mm-hmm.
You know, uh, really showing them the health benefits and really encouraging them to join a team. And I don't even mean a competitive, organized team. I'm not promoting everyone should be should try to be an elite athlete.
Mm-hmm.
I think creating more male spaces for boys. It doesn't necessarily need to be, um, boys clubs that are exclusionary of girls. That's not at all what I'm saying. Boy Scouts, I think, has a decreasing participation, or I don't even know if it's still around. Fraternities, male fraternities, there's been a real drop. And so I guess what I would suggest is that, like, if I were to be coaching a parent, I would say, like, video games aren't categorically bad, but maybe you can make it such that your kid has to go out and play with his buddy unstructured. Give them more freedom, as Jonathan Haidt would say, outside in the real world, you
Yeah.
know, um, and then be a little bit more restrictive about the cheap dopamine, video games and porn. Treat it almost as a controlled substance in a way, where
Hmm.
you're like, you wouldn't just give your kid Frosted Flakes all day long for 6 hours a day. Some kids are playing video games for 6 hours a day, right? You'd say, okay, on the weekends you can, enjoy a sugary cereal or wherever it is, however you parent. So just being really attuned to it. I think as a parent myself, I know how easy it is when you're trying to get shit done to
Hmm.
put your kid in front of a screen. I know.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
think part of this is on us parents to say, let's be more regimented around screens, and let's get our sons and daughters outside and giving them more leeway, giving them more of a runway to be bored outside and deal with it. A lot of this is
Yeah.
like a defense against boredom. It's like they can't handle. A
Hmm.
lot more likely today that kids just can't handle sitting still without being on their screen. I know it. I check my phone too much.
Yeah. Yeah. So it seems like what you're saying is give them more freedom with access to slow dopamine activities, right? And obviously, you mentioned that sports or just physical activity is one of the best ways to achieve that, right? Now, are there any other activities that you would recommend that fall under this slow dopamine category?
I mean, a good example might be like hiking. You know, something as simple as pickleball or kickball. Um, you know, it doesn't even have to be physical. We can get out of that realm now and just say like a book club, right? Like there's not that
Hmm.
high participation of men in
Yeah.
book clubs. You have to read the book and talk about it and process it. Um, Joining a men's group, it could be through your church, temple, your wherever. So the point here is that do something that's organized with other young men. And as parents, we should really be nudging our kids into that. And that's that to me is healthier. And we've lost that culture. It's a
Hmm.
throwback
Yeah.
in some way,
Yeah.
and it's sad.
Yeah, exactly. So it seems like the main idea, again, it comes down to more depth, right? So just
Mm-hmm.
promote activities that have more depth. Obviously you mentioned book clubs, and something that reminded me of is just encourage them to make something, like whether it's, a movie or build something, just something that forces them to really spend time and effort to create something and wait for that result. Like if you look at IKEA, that's something that they seem to do quite well, right? Like they kind of give people the parts, and then people actually enjoy building it themselves because they feel like they've built something and they've actually accomplished that level of high, right? So it seems like the main idea comes down to just promote these ideas that have more depth and take
Mm-hmm.
longer for people to actually experience the high that comes with, really overcoming and completing that thing, like long-term goals and stuff that go along those lines. Like, would you say
Yeah,
that that's accurate?
I would say that's accurate, and you're getting to something that is important, and
Hmm.
it's creativity too.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I, you know, picking up a guitar, picking up a a paintbrush, whatever it is, woodwork is popular with a lot of men. Using your hands to create something, it's really powerful. It's a
Yeah, exactly.
so I always want to add the art therapy piece
Yeah.
piece to this because I sometimes forget to say it, but it can be so helpful.
Yeah, exactly. And then real male confidence, like actual secure male confidence comes from action and building things, right? So it's not just going to make you feel good as you go through. Like you're going to have more self-belief in yourself because you know that you actually built something in the real world, right? So that gives you that like authentic confidence that seems to be dropping in men around the world, which is again quite concerning, but that's kind of a different topic. Now, something else that you mentioned, which is also really important, is finding healthy male spaces, right? And
Mm-hmm.
in your article, you talk about how you're not the biggest fan of boys having these like wealthy guys online and manfluencers as their role models nowadays, right? Because again, it comes hand in hand with spending more time on screens. You know what I mean? So why are you not, I guess the most supportive of having wealthy guys online and manfluencers as role models for young boys?
Um, Let me frame it this way. I'm actually not against manfluencers or wealthy guys, like uh, categorically. I think
Mm-hmm.
I think there should be manfluencers out there who are influencing. Like that's great. There,
Mm-hmm.
wealthy men talking to Mark Cuban talking to young guys about
Yeah.
wealth is an incredibly important thing. So it's not really about wealthy guys or manfluencers. It's really the wealthy guys or manfluencers who are displaying what I'll call rigid masculinity, right? Rigid masculinity is when things like strength and self-reliance and being a provider and protector and dominance and an invulnerability become rigid, or at even worse situation, they become radicalized, right, in
Mm-hmm.
more extreme ways. And so that's more. I think it's like the Wild West, on YouTube, on things like YouTube and Reddit and Discord and these other digital platforms. That it's like I'm just concerned that you know they're young guys are coming on there searching the big questions about like what it means to be a man. They're in some cases, but in a lot of other cases, just out there having fun, right? They're doing completely harmless things most of the time. They're learning
Mm-hmm.
about evolutionary science. They're learning about how to build things, DIY, and then speckled in there are these sort of voices who, I guess we always talk about Andrew Tate, but there are others. Um,
Yeah.
and then it
He's rather
becomes,
new. Mhm.
yeah, is he new?
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I
Uh,
mean, I mean, there were more, people that were doing the same thing or similar to him. He just got like a voice that was extremely amplified,
yeah.
2022, 2023-ish. But like there were guys, similar to him even before that. He just, somehow went viral, around the world. So yeah.
Well, it's good. That's good for me to know. Yeah, I don't really have a
Hmm.
time frame of when he,
Hmm.
what came before him. Um,
Hmm.
but even Andrew Tate, which if you watch a ton of his videos, which I have not, I would say that he's probably saying some healthy things some of the time, helping boys get confidence and understand things and work ethic. And then even if it's just 20% of what he says or less, that's toxic and, making it okay to overpower women or making it seem like you need to have a Bugatti in order to be lovable as a young, right? Then it's like, that's all you hear. Then that's what has staying power, right? That even if it's just 10% of what he says or 20%, or less. And so it's, it's such a jungle out
Hmm.
in these spaces that I just worry that you know that's not necessarily the model of masculinity that I would like to see young men and boys latch onto.
Hmm.
Um, it's just it's hard for them to be very judicious about it and figure out what's what. So that's what I'm concerned about.
Got it. Yeah. So if you had to give people, what you might view as a healthy male role model, like what would that look like? If you had to give a prototype, in terms of characteristics and stuff like that. Yeah. Just so, I guess people have an idea of what you're talking about, like when it comes out to healthy male role models.
Mm-hmm. Um, I was doing a training and with this therapist Terry Real, and he brought up the this baseball player Shohei Ohtani, who's like the best
Mm-hmm.
player in the league right now. He's a
Mm-hmm.
pitcher and he's an incredible
Mm-hmm.
hitter. And he reminded me of when he got hit by a pitch. Right, it was pretty. egregious. It was obvious the pitcher was
Mm-hmm.
targeting him. And
Mm-hmm.
if you watch that video, what does he do? It's a pretty badass thing he does. He just kind of like stares the guy down, gives him a look like you can't touch me. Like I'm the best in this league. It's like there's a sort of a quiet confidence.
Yeah.
He didn't need to go to aggression. He didn't need to yell.
Yeah.
So there's that element of masculinity, right? Keeping your composure, knowing when it's time to fight and storm the mound, and when it's not. So that's just like an example there. I would say that just more generally, when I think about male role models, I'm looking at well-roundedness, three-dimensionality, and that it's the man who can exhibit strength and sensitivity and know when more of one or the other is called for, the wisdom to know when one or the other is called for. And, I who do I think of? I don't know, Barack. He seems like a pretty, he seems like a guy who can balance strength and sensitivity, and know he can be invulnerable and vulnerable, right, when the moment calls for it. He seems to be that. I also think about like talented men who are able to like balance traditional masculine traits with sensitivity and traditionally feminine traits. Like, I don't know, John Legend comes to mind, right? He's incredibly talented piano player and singer and songwriter. And you hear the way he talks about women in such a loving way, right? Is he my favorite artist? No, but I'm just talking about him as respecting him as a very well-rounded guy. And so I don't know if we're necessarily finding that in the so-called manosphere, but that's what I'll say. That's my okay. And by the way, I'm still figuring it out. If you can't tell.
Yeah. So for you, it seems like you tend to kind of like resonate with more of the gentler types, like you mentioned John Legend, Obama. Like, I mean, to be honest, I don't really know much about John Legend. I mean, obviously I know the song All of Me. Like, that's, I mean, everyone knows that song, right? So because based on what you're talking about, like, for me, guys like Kobe Bryant, Cristiano Ronaldo also do come to mind. Now, obviously they tend to be more on like the tough end, but again, if you actually follow their careers, like, they have a part of them which is very sensitive, and they show it, periodically. But again, like, they have that healthy balance of what it means to, again, truly be patient and self-assured, which is pretty much what you're talking about when it comes down to, having healthy masculinity, and not just going out there and, I guess, insulting and putting your deep insecurities on display. Like, that's pretty much what you're talking about, right?
Yeah, I mean, those are, they're such incredible athletes, and Ronaldo and Kobe Bryant. And I guess where I might differ from you is that it's not, their personal lives aren't my business, and I don't even know the full extent of them. But I think if you're a stud on the athletic field of play, and like, let's say LeBron, and by the way, I'm a Bulls fan, so like, I have no reason to be a LeBron fan. But I do see like how he handles his personal life, and I respect the fact that he's, for all I know, stayed strong with his wife, and I see the way he parents his boys, and so I'm looking at that side of it too. That
I see what you're saying.
He could have caved. He had so many opportunities to cave,
and he was so young too.
And he didn't.
So young.
Yes.
Really young, like 18, 19. We're talking like really young. So
a lot of respect for that.
Yeah, I can definitely see what you're saying on that front. Now, obviously, Dr. Stone, we're slowly coming to an end here. We only have a few minutes left, but to end off, let's say we have a boy, who's not necessarily interested in sport, because not everyone's going to be interested in sport, right? Like, it's just not going to work like that. But if they wanted to get the same benefits that come with being involved in sports, are there any other hobbies or activities that could replicate sport? I know it's tough because sport is so like holistic in terms of how it helps a boy and just people in general. But are there any other activities that you could look into if you're just not interested in sport, just on like an innate level?
Yeah. And I'm glad that you said that, because I don't want it to come across as if, like, if you're not playing organized sports, like, you're not going to be healthy. No, there's a big swath of population that has no interest in
Yeah,
sports, and they're boys
yeah,
and they're men.
yeah,
So, but I would say that the camaraderie around physical movement, to break it down, is something that doesn't require you to be a gifted athlete. Now, that could look like I said, I think I mentioned before, like pickleball, bowling. You could play on, a doubles team in pickleball, and I know it's a little bit more of a solitary thing if you're playing it like 1v1 bowling. There's bowling leagues. There's dance classes. Like
hmm
those all have relational components to them too. And I'm not going to be like a real hard ass about only team sports, because even if you're doing solo sports, like as long as you're around other guys, and I'll say that it is gendered. Like, it's good for men to have male spaces where they can talk to other guys and learn and get support for their unique issues. And so, look, it doesn't even have to be physical. It could be other intellectual pursuits. Like I was talking about, a book club or a board game club, or church groups where you're talking about your religion, and how to be a better person. Or volunteer activities is a big one, I think. That it's
hmm
like, there's nothing like a cause that will
yeah,
band men together. And so if they have a reason, if they have something to fight for, whether it's building affordable housing, whether it's, delivering food to people who need it, or it's like, I don't know, start something, join something.
yeah, exactly. So it seems like like I'm just kind of trying to put what you're saying into, I guess, a statement that people can keep in mind. So it seems like what you're basically saying is that find activities that are rooted in community, that are going after a certain shared vision or goal. That
Yeah.
seems to be something that can mesh everything together, right? Because like what you're saying about volunteering, book clubs, and just all that stuff. Even going to church and stuff like that. If you're religious, again, it all comes down to having a community that's bonding over a shared vision and moving towards like a certain goal that you all have in mind, and that you're trying to achieve, right? It seems like that's kind of the main essence of what we're talking
Yes.
about here. Like, would that be
Yeah. And
accurate? Okay, cool.
it would be accurate. And another way of saying that is like, movement has multiple different meanings here. It's
hmm
physically moving, but it's also like being a part of a movement. Because being a part of a movement
Absolutely.
is seeing the bigger picture of something and standing for something and
hmm
striving towards something. It's there is a physicalized aspect to go out and care about something enough to march, or to knock on doors, or to, I don't even care what your ideological leanings are. I respect if you're going out and doing the peaceful work of being a part of a movement.
hmm Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Like as you mentioned, like it's not, like as long as you're not going to an extreme, because if you look
Right.
at like a terrorist, they're part of a
Right.
community too, and then they have a certain goal too, right? But obviously they're
Yeah.
out of their mind, because they're completely on either end of the spectrum. But it's just like, as long as you're not on an extreme, and you have a level of common sense, and your brain actually works, and you just know how to deal with people, that's technically what you're looking for. Just
That's
a
right.
strong
Yeah.
community and a shared vision.
But you're pointing to something, you're getting at something important again, and that is
hmm
that sometimes, insecurity or bad action can be justified
Yeah,
through a movement, and that is dangerous,
exactly.
and
Very.
that can attract uh, young men especially too. So you're right. I'm putting a disclaimer on that right now, that
hmm
can go both ways.
Absolutely. Okay, Dr. Stone, thank you so much for coming on. We've reached the end of our 1 hour here. This is a great episode, and obviously sports are really important. And the fact that as we spoke about, it seems to be on the decline among boys is quite concerning. So hopefully that shift begins to happen, and we have boys getting more involved in sports again, because you and I and most people know how healthy sports is, especially for young people, but especially boys. So yeah, if people wanted to go and find your work, where would you go and tell them to go?
You can go to, you could search me on Psychology Today, where my articles are, and you could find me on Instagram, although I have not been posting very much. It's at Dr.
Mhm.
Jett Stone. That's at Dr. Jett Stone. You can find my book, Quiet Your Mind, A Men's Guide, on Amazon, or anywhere you buy books.
Mhm.
And eventually, you can also find me at what's called the Men's Therapy Hub. I'm working with a colleague of mine, Chris Hemmings, on building out a database of male therapists and a community around a male community around mental health. And so that's menstherapyhub.co.uk for now. It's in the UK, but we're bringing it to the US too. So just wanted to plug that here because um, it's an exciting project that I'm working on.
God, yeah. If you can send me all those links, I'll post it down below, and obviously, people can go and check it out if need be.
Will do. It was a pleasure, Shaq.
It was a pleasure. Thank you so much. Hey, this was really fun, and yeah, I hope you have a great day, and maybe we can do it again.
Yes.